Welcome, everyone. Bienvenidos a todos. Waiting a few minutes for everyone to get into the webinar. My name is Jennifer Zachman, and I'm the chair of the Department of Modern Languages and Cultures. And on behalf of my colleagues in our department and all of our sponsors, I would like to welcome you all to tonight's screening of Afrolatinos. This is the first film in our virtual festival celebrating Ibero-American cinema. The festival begins tonight, kicking off with Afrolatinos, and will continue through March with a new film every Thursday. Each film will have a live introduction, a screening, and a follow-up discussion via Zoom on the screening date indicated. Those are all available on the St. Mary's Events webpage. I'd like to, before I go further, I want to thank our sponsors. This festival has been made possible through the generosity of Spanish Film Club Progda grant, as well as the co-sponsorship of the following departments, for which we are very grateful: English, Gender and Women's Studies, Global Studies, History, the Office of Inclusion and Equity, the Office of Multicultural and International Student Services, the Student Diversity Board, and the Center for Women's Intercultural Leadership. We're gonna welcome, I'm gonna welcome my colleague, Professor Sandra Usuga, who's gonna give us an introduction to our award Emmy-winning director who's here with us tonight, the film's director, Renzo Davia. But I wanna just say that before we move on to that, I wanna ask that as the film, keep track of any questions that you have, since Renzo will join us after the film to answer questions. Anything at all about from filming to marketing, anything like that that you want to ask him, you can send those questions in the chat and we will pose them to the director. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce my colleague, Professor Sandra Usuga, and thank her also for making this event happen. So Sandra, over to you.
Thank you, Professor Zachman. Good evening, everyone. I'm Sandra Usuga, a professor of Spanish in the Department of Modern Languages. I would like to start this introduction with a quote and a personal anecdote related to tonight's documentary. Cito, la presencia africana no puede reducirse a un fenómeno marginal de nuestra historia. Su fecundidad inunda todas las arterias y nervios del nuevo hombre americano. Fin de cita. Quote, the American presence cannot be reduced to a marginal phenomenon in our history. Its fecundity floods all the arteries and nerves of the new American man, end of quote. Manuel Zapata Olivella, 1920-2004. Manuel Zapata Olivella was a prominent Afro-Colombian writer, intellectual, anthropologist, medical doctor, and activist. Despite the fact that I completed my primary and secondary and college education in Colombia, I had never heard of him. I learned about him in the United States as a graduate student. In fact, it was the scholarly community in the United States that in the 1970s was the first to study and recognize his contributions concerning the representation of the African diaspora in the Americas. This international recognition finally awakened the interest of the Colombian academia to pay closer attention and to value his work and activism. This is just an example of the exclusion and invisibility that people of color experience even as intellectuals in Latin America, a region in which people falsely proclaim that there's no racism but only classism. Latin America has both, and racism is indeed as structural there as it is in the United States. Tonight, we are privileged to have with us the director and producer of the film Afrolatinos, Mr. Renzo Devia. He's an Emmy Award-winning US-born television producer and director of Colombian descent who strives to project positive, dynamic images of Latinos on television. He's an experienced producer who has received multiple awards because of his work. He traveled throughout all Latin America for 5 years, documenting the film of tonight, Afrolatinos, which investigates the African diaspora in Spanish-speaking countries. After 23 years of producing English and Spanish language content for Hispanics in the US and abroad, Mr. Renzo Devia's vision has been consistent. to unite Latinos and empower them through storytelling on broadcast television. I now leave you with Mr. Renzo Devia. Thank you so much, Renzo. It is truly an honor to have you here at St. Mary's College. And thank you to all of you for participating tonight. Enjoy this insightful documentary.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Sandra, Jennifer, Lori, and St. Mary's College. Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for this opportunity to show the film, the documentary Afrolatinos, the Untaught History. A little background, I'm from New York, born and raised in New York. All my family is Colombian, de Colombia, South America. And being born in New York, you're very diverse. You grow up with different people from different backgrounds. But I didn't really know that much about my African descent. Being a Latino, in school, you learn about the indigenous culture, and you learn about the Spanish, connections, but you don't really learn about the African connection you have as a Latino. So, and we have it in the music, in tambores and drums, we have it in our food, we have it in our dance, we have it in so many different ways. So as a television producer, I wanted to do something about it. I wanted to cover it. I wanted to investigate and do a documentary. And that's where the idea of Afrolatinos came about. My writer, Alicia Novel Santos, and I basically came together in 2008. We invested over $200,000, 5 years of shooting, all over Latin America, 19 countries. Took over 2 years to edit. And we found an incredible diamond that needed to be showed to the whole world. Afro-Latino history has not been taught, not only in the US, but of course not in Latin America. It's not in textbooks. And that's why we did it. We did this documentary to create dialogue for everybody to learn the history and of course celebrate the culture. That's another reason we did the documentary. So today, you guys are gonna see bits and pieces of a 7-part series. That's always been the objective of this project. To do 7 parts of an hour, 7 parts for television. That's always been the objective. So what we did was we condensed it to 1 hour with bits and pieces. So today you're going to see a little bit about history, about gastronomy, about religion, about music and dance, social issues, and kind of get a little broad history about Afro-Latinos in all of Latin America. So I hope you guys enjoy it. Please stay to the end. It's an hour long. And at the end, we can answer questions. And I'm here to share this with everybody. Thank you.
And I am Professor Jennifer Zachman, and I'm going to be your moderator for the question and answer session. So I already have a few questions in the chat. And so I'm so glad that we have Renzo Devia here with us, the director of the film. So Renzo, if you're ready, I'm just going to go ahead and throw you a question. First of all, thank you so much. I'm still sort of absorbing. One of the first questions was, how did you, this sort of goes back a little bit to what you said in your introduction, but how did the filming of Afro-Latinos inspire you to celebrate your heritage? I feel like the documentary is a celebration of the heritage, but personally.
Well, I think it all started with salsa. I grew up loving salsa in my house in the 70s, 80s. Salsa music was very important in our household, in our family. And salsa, it has a very much, it has a lot of a connection with Africa. Not only from La Clave, from Cameroon, to, of course, the drums, the singing, song and response. There's so many things, of course, dancing, so many things that connect us to Africa, but I didn't know. I really didn't know. When I started investigating, then I was like, I can't believe I celebrate African culture and my African roots every single day, every time I listen to salsa. When I eat, I like sancocho and empanadas and plantains, all that comes from Africa. And I would say the Orishas, or the religion of Santeria, it always attracted me. I was always interested in it. And then I found out, of course, it comes from Africa. So there's a lot of parts in that I learned during the investigation, during the filming, that I say, wow, I was always interested in this. Like, for example, La Marimba, I don't know, Sandra could help me. I don't know how you say it in English, marimba, marimba. That instrument is from Africa, but in Colombia, for example, we celebrate all the time in our folkloric music from the Pacific part of Colombia. So I think that once I was enlightened by all this information, I couldn't believe how much of African influence is in the Colombian culture and Puerto Rican culture, Dominican culture, but we don't really know, or perhaps we don't celebrate it. So that's what we did the documentary. We did a documentary so everybody could find out a little bit about their African roots in Latino culture, and we could celebrate it and talk about it, because I think that's important.
Thank you. It sounds like it was life-altering in a lot of ways going through the process. I'm just going to kind of curate the questions. I want to say one for the end that was posed earlier, but I wanted to know, one other attendee wanted to know if you were surprised by how many Afro-Latinos experienced racism while you were doing the filming.
Yes, so actually, here's an interesting note. I wanted to do a segment, or let's call it an episode, just on racism in Latin America. And I found out that, of course, in every single country, there is a type of racism. But of course, in some countries more than others. Like, for example, I found that in Cuba, there's racism, even in Brazil. And the population of Afro-descendants are so high there. So I couldn't believe it. I didn't understand that. Why? In Colombia also, there's more than 20% of the population in Colombia are Afro-descendants, and there's racism there. So after investigating, there's just a lot of ignorance. Let's start with ignorance, and let's start with education, because that's one of the first things I found out, that because this story, this history hasn't been told, people don't know. People don't know. They say negrito, negrita, like it's nothing, but these are terms that were used in the times of slavery in Latin America. So why are we using them today? But of course, it's a social thing. It's not like we're going to change things in 1 year and 10 years, but it all starts with education. And again, this documentary, we want to make it into a curriculum. I think there has to be a curriculum in Latin America. There needs to be textbooks about this. Since we started this project in 2008, people are more conscious. And I'll give you an example. When we started on this documentary, we went to communities and we were like, oh, do you consider yourself an Afro-Latino? To be black Latinos. And they said, no, what is an Afro-Latino? I am Cuban, or I am Colombian, or I am Puerto Rican. So now, today, many people consider themselves Afro-Latinos, or Afro-descendants, or Afro-Peruvians, or Afro-Ecuadorians. So there's more consciousness now than before. But the topic of racial discrimination is very different in each country. It's very different compared, like, from Mexico to Argentina. It's so different. And we could start with the census. They don't exist in the census. So if you don't exist in the census, there is no funds for education, for health. Like, basically, I've interviewed people that in Argentina specifically, that they didn't let them leave the country when they gave their passports, because the immigration said there's no Black Argentinians. They don't exist here. And this lady, she's actually an activist, she was like, yes, I'm Argentinian and I'm Black. And here's my passport. I want to leave the country. Immigration was like, no, you must be Peruvian. We're going to investigate you because we think you're lying, because Argentinians are not Black. There is no Black Argentinians. In Bolivia, you also will find a very small population of Afro-Bolivians, but nobody knows about them. So education is first. Education is key.
Sorry, the question that popped up in the chat, just first a comment that someone made, is that cultures from Africa and Latin America inspired you so much that you became famous for making documentaries, that you're contributed to your career. So that's someone posting that as a comment. Also, this is an interesting question related to education. How do you approach, or how does one approach legislators in Latin America who delegate what historical content is taught in terms of education? And obviously that's a question that's going to be different in every single country, but that's a question that's
Yes.
in the chat.
Well, I could tell you right now, Cuba or Colombia. In Colombia, there's actually a law, la ley 95, that is specifically 93 or 95, I don't remember. That law specifically says that the Afro-Colombian history needs to be taught in schools. That Afro descendants need or should have some ownership of some land if they're descendants from Africa. There's a lot of specific things, but they're not executed. They're not executed. And in Cuba, the Afro history is taught, but to an extent. And again, it has to do with the government. So how does one do it? Well, they need to really, I guess, put together a plan of how to teach this, how to take this to the next level, perhaps a curriculum, books, lectures, go to universities with this topic. There has to be an investment specifically for education, I think, because I really found that I would find like one expert in each country, for example, and I can tell you who they are. But one expert in Mexico and one expert in Panama. But I mean experts. Now, it's been over 10 years since we started this project. There are more people that know about this project, that are professors, that they focus their careers in Afro-Latino history and studies. But there still is much room for improvement. And that's where the US comes in, because the US has the capacity, the students and universities, they have the capacity to study more this topic and take it to the next level, where perhaps we can go back to these communities and help them out, because the poverty levels are very high. There are people still below the line of poverty in Afro-Latino communities to this day. Costa Rica, Nicaragua, Mexico, and Costa Chica, Mexico. So they need funding, they need education, they need health, and the US can contribute.
So one thing someone asked in the chat was, where can people rent the film? So I'm just going to drop the link to the webpage in that. In the St. Mary's community, if you're part of the St. Mary's community, you'll be getting an email tomorrow about viewing it on the portal, which Renzo has graciously agreed to allow us to do for a week. But only for the St. Mary's community on our portal. But I will drop the link into the chat where you can rent it if you're interested in that, or to share with others. Another question, so that was one question in that group of questions. Sorry, I'm trying to read and scroll at the same time. Okay, so first of all, I think I'm gonna go in reverse order. So Afro-Latinos or Afro-Latinx? Or Afro-Latinx, from your experience when we're talking about terminology, and I thought that was, from my own perspective, really interesting that you touched on that, and I would assume that was maybe even a whole episode, right, about what we call people, what people want to be called, what it means to identify. So I wondered if you had a thought on that, Afro-Latinos or Afro-Latinx, and then someone asked in that same question, in your experience, what did you see in terms of the situation, particularly of women and people in the LGBTQ communities of color in Latin America? Because then we're looking at maybe a double or triple marginalization.
Yeah, that's a great question. So we started the project in 2008, and the word Latinx didn't exist back then. Latino X, Latinx. We called it Afro-Latinos because the United Nations calls people of African descent in Latin America Afro-Latinos. That is a politically correct way to call people of African descent in Latin America Afro-Latinos. So we called it that. Of course, now we are more conscious about gender. We're more conscious about everything. So things have changed. And for us to change the name of the documentary, it's a little late, I guess. But if we didn't do an episode, or we didn't do a segment on the gay community, or being Afro. And of course, it's a very, very big topic. My writer, Alicia Nebel Santos, is really somebody that's an expert in this topic. She's an activist. She's a lesbian activist. And she covers this topic all the time. I guess we'll send the link to you. You guys can follow her on Instagram.
Oh, great.
Because yes, being Afro and being gay is, pretty tough in Latin America, especially because the African heritage is, I guess, anti-gay or homophobic, call it. And the Latinos very machistas. So it's very difficult. But I think nowadays, in the big cities, things are getting a little more open. But when Afro-Latino communities, you got to understand, they're very marginalized. Okay, they live in very traditional, isolated areas. So they're not really open to these ideas yet, but in the big cities, they are.
That makes sense, because that is true still in many parts of the US as well. And I apologize if I'm looking this way, because I have two screens happening, and I'm listening, but I'm also looking. So a question, someone asked, is Latinx related to gender? My answer to that would be no. Latinx, to be more inclusive, I think, is the way that has developed. So I'm saving a couple questions for the end, because I think they fit better there. But I'm curious, someone says, this is a question reading to you from the chat. I'm curious about the US Census designations for race and ethnicity, especially for those who identify as Latino, Latina, Latinx. Friends in the US from Ecuador and elsewhere in Latin America are as confused as I am. Do you anticipate Afro-Latino, Afro-Latina, Afro-Latinx will become an identifying term in the US Census in the future if we continue with racial designations?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. I hope it happens soon. I remember we touched on a topic in the documentary. It's not in this, because remember, we covered 7 parts. In Brazil, they had over 100 or like 80 different ways to call a Black Latino, a Black Brazilian. Many, many different ways. And that's very confusing, though. That's very confusing in the census.
So it was up to people to self-identify?
Yeah. So I'll give an example. In Colombia, that happens too. For example, Palenquero. Palenquero are Afro-descendants from the area of Palenque, which is a free African village. To this day, it's still, conserved as an Afro-African village. Then there's Raizales. They're from San Andres. It's an island that belongs to Colombia, but they speak English, for example, because they have West Indian influence. Then you have Negro, Afrodescendiente. I mean, you have so many different categories that you have to kind of say to yourself, okay, I fit this. This is what identifies me in the census. In Latin America, of course, in every country is different. I know Cuba has a lot of also different categories, but in the US, no, not yet. And I think it should. I guess, to be honest with you, most of the topics we always talk about in the US is related to identity. Identity is really the main topic that we cover in Afro-Latinos through social media, for example, in all our conversations and stuff here in the US.
Sorry, try to mute myself just in case there's background noise, and then I forget to unmute. Sorry. It's like I'm a Zoom rookie, which I shouldn't be. In any case, I wanted to ask you a little bit about how you, and if this is something that people can sort of look up, or you have somewhere on your website, we can reference that as well. But I wondered if you could talk a little bit about how you went from the series to the documentary. That's really interesting to me.
So originally, we mapped out 7 parts, okay? Part 1 and 2, history. Then we talked about the second, migration of Afros in Latin America, which is like West Indies. You saw it here from Costa Rica, Panama. And then, of course, we went into religion. We had song and music and dance. We had gastronomy and the women's contribution to Afro-Latino history. We had social issues. So basically, we had 7 parts, but we ran out of funds. Everything in my pocket. Alicia and myself, my writer, we had to pay for everything. We never got funding. We never got sponsorship. So everything basically came from our pocket, and we ran out of money.
Mm.
So because we didn't get a chance to finish all 7 episodes, when I moved back to the US, I said, let me, get excerpts of everything and put it all in one piece.
I see. I see.
And that's what we did. What you saw is parts of the 7-part series, but it's just condensed in 1 hour, so we can screen it, and get it out. Because think about it, we finished shooting in 2012, and it's been sitting in my computer till 2015. That's the first time it came out to universities. And just recently, last year, we put it on Vimeo on demand. So it's work that has been in a process for many years, but now it's coming out.
Well, so that actually leads to another question that someone put in the chat, which is what's next for you with this series? I mean, is it thinking about finishing it, going into more depth in certain elements like the LGBTQ question?
Well, I think the answer to that question is you guys. That's what's next. We want to have this in universities. We want a curriculum. We want universities to have actual Afro-Latino studies. That's what we really want. We want this material to be used as a tool to teach Afro-Latino history and to celebrate the culture. So we really want to work with universities, lectures, and perhaps even teach the teachers so they can keep this information going. And we want students to get interested in this topic so they can go out and do more research. Because I'm a television producer and I ran out of money. I really can't continue shooting and editing and I haven't been able to get funds. So I think the answer is, universities, colleges to really embrace us by doing lectures, books, and of course, screenings like this one. And hopefully we'll build a curriculum together so we can, spread this information out because it's really important.
So a follow-up question to that was one that came in, was there a specific thing that you learned during your research that you wanted to explore more, but that you're kind of talking about not having funding or time or person power. Was there one other specific thing that you wanted to explore more that you had to sort of leave by the wayside?
Yes, definitely. And let's start. The first thing is the numbers. The numbers are really not solid. And when I talk about the numbers, how many Africans were brought to Colombia? We don't know. How many Africans were brought to Mexico? We don't know. The numbers are from the thousands to a million. There are how many Afro-Latinos really arrived to Latin America? From 12 million to 15? Like, we really don't know. I literally went to Spain, to Madrid, and I went to France with UNESCO to get official numbers of how many enslaved Africans came from Africa to specifically each country in Latin America. And there were a lot of question marks because there was a lot of contraband. They would buy in groups, illegal smuggling. I'll give an example. In Peru, after the abolition, they used to smuggle Africans from the coast all the way to an hacienda called San Martin, I think it's called. And I went and I covered it. And we don't know how many Africans were smuggled, how many left from the area of Colombia went into Ecuador, for example, and Brazil, how many escaped into the palenques, or they call it quilombos. So we don't really know these numbers. And I think it's important to start there, to really know our research. But it takes money and it takes time.
So a question, and I'm not ignoring any questions. I'm sort of trying to put them in order. But do you have suggestions for materials on how to teach these things to younger kids? And then also, as a follow-up, someone asked how we can support and promote your work?
Well, I think nowadays in the internet, there's so many portals. I'll give an example, the Garifuna community. They have so many different websites to teach you about the Garifuna culture. I think after COVID, I invite everybody to try to visit Afro-Latino communities, try to travel there, because that changes your mind completely. Just going to an Afro-Latino community and living the lifestyle, the food, the dance, the language, religion, all this stuff, you're like, wow, that's what creates that interest. And then you start getting into the studying and perhaps even practicing the culture. So I think, you know, it's a combination of how much do you really want, and also what country really attracts you. You know, is it Bolivia? You know, because nobody really talks about Afro-Bolivians. You know, is it Peru? You know, is it Chile? You know, we saw in the documentary about breeding enslaved Africans. You know, there's an interesting topic nobody ever talks about. There's so much. So you kind of have to find your interest and then do research to get closer to that, and you know, to help us out, spread the word. You know, spread the word of our documentary, and you can see it on Vimeo on demand.
And I did put the link in the chat, so hopefully anyone who wants to can access it there. Someone asked how you see your documentary and your work being different from or connecting with, I'm going to add the work of Henry Louis Gates.
Yes, no, definitely. Well, obviously he's a professor, he's on camera, and he's African American. He only covered 4 countries, I believe. And his point of view is from the US. Well, that's what his project is about. Our project, we are not on camera. Alicia and I are behind the cameras. We're just writing and documenting everything. We covered 19 countries. Everything's in Spanish. You know, we had to subtitle everything and do the voiceover in English, but everything's in Spanish. And we are Latino. You know, yo soy colombiano and Alicia dominicana. Right. And our native language is Spanish. Right. So, and on top of that, you know, we practice Afro-Latino culture. You know, we have Afro in our blood. Not only do we practice Santeria and Ifa, for example, that's our religion, but it's part of our culture, and we recognize it, you know, and a lot of Latinos don't. A lot of Latinos say, oh, but I am not Black, so I don't associate myself with Black culture. Again, education. Once you start learning about your descendants, how Latinos are so mixed. You know, in that documentary, you saw a scientist that studies genes. He said we're all mixed. Nobody's pure. Nobody's pure. Even the most indigenous people have some kind of mix of another race. So we're not pure. So once you start learning, you know, go to study your DNA. What is it? 21 and
yeah, there's a couple of them.
Yeah, a couple of them, right? I did mine many years ago, and my lineage from my father comes from Africa, and my mother comes from the Middle East. So once you learn about your DNA, you're like, this is science. Like it says here, I had genes from there. So, you know, stuff like that, it just enlightens you.
Do you, one of our alums who's greeting me also, hi, Genesis, good to see you here, asked, what are some ways to celebrate Afro-Latinos during Black History Month? Hopefully this is one. That's one of the reasons we wanted you to come and screen at this time. But are there other ways that you can think of?
Yes.
That
Definitely. First thing, food. Let's eat Afro-Latino food. So investigate, and you can cook. You could be in Indiana and you can cook a sancocho. You know, why not?
Like that idea.
Yeah, I don't know if you'll find plantains there. I guess you'll find plantains, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, right. And yuca and stuff like that, and you can make it. So food is one way you can celebrate. Obviously, music. It could be as commercial as salsa, or it can be as traditional, you know, as un mapalé from Colombia, or it can be something religious that'll you know make you feel more spiritual, like Yoruba music. You know, something beautiful that I love is language. I think it's so interesting. In Mexico, people say chamba. Oye, vamos a la chamba. Let's work. Chamba means work. But chamba is an African word. So many words in our Spanish language come from Africa. You know, as a matter of fact, what's something very interesting is, you know, the Moors, that they had African influence, and the Moors influenced Spanish in language, for example. So that's where it comes from.
Right.
So like with the word moreno, where does it come from? From Moors, los moros, moreno, Moors, for example. So once you find that out, you're like, oh, wow, I can't believe it. I didn't know.
I love the idea of celebrating also with food. That's really interesting. So I have Okay. So here's another question. I had one, but I think we'll probably maybe, I don't know how long we're going, but I think we'll take maybe 2 or 3 more questions. So why was the scientist involved when race is usually considered a social construct when talking about genes?
Because we had to prove it scientifically, because a lot of people don't believe if when we say it. Okay, you go to a person. I'm gonna give you an example, and if you don't believe me, please prove me wrong. Talk to any Dominican. Go to any Dominican and say, you're black, tú eres negro. And the first thing they're gonna be like, hell no, I am not black. And they look as black as black. But they will not admit it because they are anti-black. Really, they're anti-Haitian. They don't like Haitians. The Dominican and Haitian society really clashes. And it's a very long topic, and it's very controversial. But at the end of the day, Dominicans don't admit they're black. So if you prove it to them scientifically, and I have with scientists from Puerto Rico and Dominican Republic saying that I think it's over 60% of the population is of African descent. They had DNA from Africa, Dominican.
Right.
So, and Puerto Ricans. How can you be racist? How could you be racist?
Well, I think it comes back to that idea that it's the terminology, right? The idea that when we construct these oppositions, because they're all constructed, right, by society. What is not constructed is the African descent, right? That's the piece, I think. I had a question for you about I find really interesting the part about beauty norms. And I wondered, there was one part in the documentary where there was a young man talking about his hair, and then the men were talking about hair. Did they have good hair? Did they have bad hair? But I wondered if you noticed any of those, I don't want to say that it only influences women, these social constructs of what is beautiful, what is not beautiful, and this whole notion of wanting to change yourself to conform more to a certain standard of beauty, which in Western, the history of Western culture has been that Euro centric sort of image, which has changed over the years too, right? If we look back, but in any case, I wondered if you had heard any of those things from men.
Yes, of course. In the documentary, you see it when we interviewed a lot of Afro-Latinos men. They wanted to marry a white woman or a light-skinned woman, and vice versa. And it always came to the same thing. I asked why, and they said because quieren mejorar la raza. They want to better the race. Things like they want the nose to be more más fina, skinnier, and the hair to be straight, and blah blah blah. And I couldn't believe that it was just recurring after every country. And I would be in Chile, and then I would go to the Dominican Republic, and then Mexico, and I was like, I can't believe this. And they haven't talked to each other. Like this is like normal in the society. So is racism really deep inside unconsciousness? I mean, why are they thinking that they want to be more white than black? Why are they not saying black is beautiful? Now, of course, like you said, nowadays things have changed. When we started in 2008, we saw this a lot. But now, I would say since 2015, 2016, we see more Afro consciousness, Afrocentric people saying, wow, you know what? Yo soy negro, yo soy orgulloso. I'm proud of my curls or whatever. So I think things are getting better. Things are getting better, but yes, men. And what's funny is, since I am not of Afro or negro, soy negro, pues I see the racist side, because they think that, because he's white, he's going to be racist. ¿Me entiendes? And this happens a lot with Latinos, where light-skinned Latinos talk bad about Afro-Latinos because of their color. And I'm like, dude, I can't believe what you're saying. I'm here behind the scenes, and I'm here what you're saying, and this is the way you think. And men.
Right.
And why do I mention it? Because unfortunately, they have this negative stereotype of Afro-Latinas. you know, Afrolatinos. So, and I'm like, I can't believe you don't understand that they're queens. Like they are the birth of humankind. Like, don't you understand that? Don't you understand? Why don't you value them? Why don't you value them? And they're just, you know, in different social, I guess, I don't even know how to explain it. So unfortunately, machistas, they're machistas, Latinos are very machistas, you know.
Well, that was the thing that struck me, is that a lot of men talk about wanting to, you know, have their offspring look different or conform to a different standard. And the women themselves talk about their conformity or non-conformity, that standard. And I wondered if men judged themselves in that same way.
Yeah, and let me finish by saying a big part of that is the class that you are. You know, if you, unfortunately, if you are under poverty, you're going to think that way. And of course, if you're really high in a social class, you're going to think that way. But in the middle class, kind of get it. They kind of understand a little bit, and they're less. I don't want to say racist, but perhaps racist than other social categories.
That's interesting. That's material for a study, probably, that hypothesis. So another, I'll call this the penultimate question, the second to last question.
I'm good.
Okay.
I'm good. I can stay here.
All right. So where can people find out more about the work of the experts that you interviewed? So the professors and the other directors of centros and things like that. Where can people find out more about their work?
Well, if you look at the documentary, their names are there, and you can Google them. Each country has. Okay, so basically, you know, when we started doing our research, we broke it into parts, right? Okay, for example, when we go to Cuba, we're going to talk about the African diaspora, o sea, history, enslaved people, and where they come from Africa. So we had to find historians that study, you know, what part of Africa enslaved Africans came to Cuba. And then we're going to talk about drums. So we got to find an expert on drums. Then we're going to talk about religion. So we got to find santeros. But in Mexico, it's not like that. In Mexico, you have Costa Chica, which is very different from Veracruz, which is on the other side of Mexico. And Veracruz, supposedly like 500 or 300,000 Africans came to Veracruz, the port of Veracruz. And from there, they spread to other parts of Central America. And some enslaved Africans escaped from there and went all the way to the other end of Mexico, which is Costa Chica and Oaxaca. So those experts are different. They know different history. So again, we had to travel. We had to find this out. We purchased books. That I have a collection of books, actually in Colombia, a huge library of books that we had to read and understand what each country taught us, because it was different. So I would concentrate on each country and what topic, and I'll give you another example. Argentina has different migrations of Afro descendants. You have del tronco colonial, which is from enslaved Africans that were enslaved by the Spanish. Then the second migration was from Costa de Marfil. I think it was Costa de Marfil, Ivory Coast. I forgot, from a different part of Africa. And then the latest immigration would be Africans that go there to work, Dominicans or Afro-Latinos that go to Argentina to work. So there's different épocas, there's different eras that Afros reached to Argentina. Same thing with Panama. Panama has the de los Afro-Andinos, Afro-Antillas, how do you say it in English? From the West Indies. From the West Indies that came to Panama. But before that, they had Africans enslaved, that were the Congos. Those were in Puerto Velo. So again, two different eras, two different times, two different migrations, two different experts. You know, so you kind of have to do the preliminary research and say, hey, I want to find out about the Congos from Panama. And then you will find those experts.
Do you get the sense now, even in the time that's passed since you started and finished the documentary, that at least at the university level, there's more history being taught?
And material, definitely. And what's interesting, another very interesting point that I really need to express to everyone is that the African American community has embraced this project. The African American community has really been open to.
We lost your video. Oh, I think we lost Renzo. Professor Usuga, did you have anything you wanted to share maybe as we try to get him back? Oh, here he is.
Okay.
Oh, there you are.
Okay, you hear me?
We got you.
Okay, great. Sorry about that.
That's okay.
So like I was telling you, the African American communities really have embraced this project. They've welcomed us with open arms. They have really been interested in further studies. While the Latino community, very little interest, very little participation. And I'll give you examples of film festivals. We've shown this more in African American film festivals than Latino film festivals. I could probably say two Latino film festivals and like over 5 or 6 African American film festivals. So there needs to be more outreach to Latino communities. And definitely we embrace the African American community because they want to invest. They want to, continue these studies.
What's next for you? I'd like us, before we close, for you to talk a little bit about what you're working on now. We talked a little bit about the series that you're filming now. That's airing now, albeit at not great times on major networks. But tell us more about what you're doing right now and what's next for you.
Well, I'm a television producer and I do a lot of projects. I've done one. Right now I'm focusing on one to save the planet. It's eco ventures, that it's like tourism, but eco tourism basically. I produce a show called Raw Travel, which is about travel, but on a budget and basically, just exploring. It's about travelers, really.
Right, and I'll just stop and say, locally, you can see it on Fox and you can see it also on CBS, but you might want to just what is it called? DVR? Where you record it? DVR it, but check your local listings because it airs here, the Raw Travel.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead, Renzo.
So, I work on a lot of projects, but Afrolatinos really is my love, but my passion. It's what I really needed to get to universities because all this research, all this documenting, it's stuck in my computer. People rent it once in a while from Vimeo, and that's it. There's really, we can't put it free on YouTube because we've invested over $200,000 into it, and there's still a lot of room to finish the whole 7-part series. So to answer your question, I really want to work with universities to try to make this into a curriculum.
Well, I will shout out, I know I have non-St. Mary's colleagues, people, friends from graduate school, colleagues from across the street at Notre Dame who are probably here with us tonight. And if you didn't catch the link earlier, please get in touch with us and we are happy to make a virtual introduction. We are so grateful to have had you with us tonight.
Thank you, guys.
It's the first time I've ever had a Zoom interaction with an Emmy award-winning director. So we're just so grateful that you were here to join us. I think it really inaugurates our festival in an amazing way. And also you are the one director that we have joining us. So it's pretty amazing.
Thank you, everyone.
Sandra, did you have anything else you wanted to add?
No, just thank you so much. This was a wonderful event. Thank you, Renzo, for everything, for this documentary. So insightful, so important to have these talks, even nowadays, even more. So just thank you so much.
Thank you guys very much. St. Mary's College.
Thank you so much, Renzo. Yeah. And I'll just, it looks like we have one new message just in case.
Yeah.
Who says thank you. No, just a thank you. The last thing I'll say, just as a little plug, as I said at the beginning, this is the first in our series celebrating Ibero-American cinema. And I just dropped into the chat the link for next week's film, the Infiltrators, and we will be convening for the next 5 consecutive Thursdays at 6:30, and we will. Whoops, sorry, we'll Zoom bomber here. And so anyway, sorry. So join us, and please visit the website where you can find more details about, yes, all Eastern time, all Eastern time. We had a bit of some confusion about that, but all of our streaming events will be at 6:30 Eastern time. So great. Thank you so very much. And I want to give a special shout out, even though they're not all here, to all the amazing people in marketing and to our Zoom host, Richard Baxter, the people in special events, Lori Zimmerman, who's going to help us put things on the portal and has helped us with all the other supporting elements and emails and all those things. It's been really a group effort, and I'm so grateful for everyone's participation. Thank you, and we'll see you next week, I hope. Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.